It's Tegan here again. I'm back sharing with you the goals and purposes of the nomadic community model. And in our previous video, we were talking a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are. And that incorporated a set of questions that it's really important to understand. When we were first starting, we wanted to do permaculture, organic growing. That was our utmost priority. And through that mission and vision and journey, we found that growing organic food and growing a sustainable, abundant amounts of organic food is a very in-depth and perhaps lifelong mission. And in the environment and the space we found ourselves on the beach in a desert type environment with extreme dry seasons and very difficult growing conditions, we found that sustainability was a long way off. And we reflected this kind of through the lens of permaculture, that also in the exterior world we were a long way off from true sustainability and true permaculture societies. And in that meantime, what we could do is focus on this fact that the thing missing for people was a space in which really cared for them in a way that was enabling them to become much greater than they are currently, or where they're at currently. And so, why nomadic? Why do we choose to be nomadic? And a lot of that question stems from the fact that our effort is to help the earth, right? To help Mother Earth, or whatever we're going to call it, the thing that gives us life, that has been abused and poisoned and polluted for many, many decades, if not centuries by now. And we came to the realization that this question, what are we, was perhaps the most important to answer, because if we didn't know what we were, how are we going to design a permaculture community for our environment? So in finding out this question, what are we, you can look very much into Eastern thought, meditation, yoga, yogis, gurus, and we can see there's obviously a wealth of information there that lies deep within unspoken conversations that have existed for thousands and thousands of years. This, however, is a very intimate and personal and perhaps long journey to discover what the essence of what we are. And in order to really create anything of substance, we have to have a clear answer of this. So part of why nomadic is partially for this question of what we are. If you're going to break away from your normal life, or Babylon, or the Matrix, see definitions, you're going to need a space and a container that's going to help facilitate that experience. And one of those questions that is going to be important to solve is, what are we? And in that pattern and in that time, you also have other things that you're patterned to. We talked earlier in the history video that personally, the reason I couldn't make a permaculture environment or thing is because my desires, my feelings laid somewhere else. And this is an important part to incorporate. Sometimes we think something and we're emotionally attached to something else. And even though I want to be sustainable and I want to do this and I want to do that, in my patterns, in my brain, as we'll go into later through Dr. Joe Dispenza, it provides energy that goes against those desires because I've been patterned or conditioned into doing or acting in certain ways. So why nomadic? Well, if you're breaking away from the Matrix or Babylon and you're excited, you're going to want to build something or make something. Most likely that's how a lot of people go. You can see here that through our journey, we were evaluating where we were at. We're coming from a destructive system, one we've labeled and named Babylon. And we wanted to go to harmony in a permaculture society. But what we realized was a jump from here to here without an intermediary step for deprogramming and healing would essentially bring the destructive nature of Babylon into what we're desiring to be a harmonious permaculture society. And so what we realized was that in order to not only change what we wanted, in our feelings and our emotional attachments so that we could better create a harmonic permaculture society, one that lived in harmony, we would first need to create a space that allowed us to heal and deprogram. And this thus was born the nomadic community space. We all want to live in harmony and be in a permaculture society, or not all of us, but hopefully soon enough, all of us will. And in order to get there, we first have to have some deprogramming and some healing happening. And that's why we want to be nomadic, because in order to have whole people create a harmonic environment, we're going to need whole people. So another situation, where the way you can look at it is, if we all were raised from this system, a destructive Babylonian system, and the information and the mindsets and the people, myself included, come from the system. When I came to make a permaculture system at Finca Morpho, all I had was destructive ideas and desires and habits. So when I went to try to create some harmony, all I found was destruction because I didn't heal or deprogram first. So for myself and my team and everyone else that comes, I realized that deprogramming in a nomadic space was much more feasible to accomplish our goals. And that's what got us even further down to this conversation of what is community, right? What is community? What does it mean to be in community? What does it mean to be in community? What does it mean? So, you look at our standard definitions now, and a lot of the assumptions of what a community is have to do with some kind of hippie 60s 70s commune. Everybody lives together, they work together, they do things together, and it is a one giant family or organism. However, when we study permaculture and we study nature, there are no systems that work quite like that. There are some species, but specifically, this is why I really like it. We study science and permaculture, and we look at our species, look at what we're like, and the other species that are similar to us, and we find something radically different. That probably what community looks like, and you'll find a little bit of this in the Anastasia books that we'll go into later, is groups of sovereign families. And what is a sovereign family? A sovereign family is a family that has food, water, shelter, and love, which we'll go into later, which means that they need no one or nothing, which means that they're taken care of, which means when they leave their space or their place or their dwelling, they're not in a taking or needing energy. They're not stealing or sacking or pillaging or buying from neighbors or nearby energies. So this is a really important factor, because if people come into nomadic community space with the assumption that community, we'll go into definitions again, is the assumption of the commune, then this is going to cause issues and problems, because we're looking for people who are becoming sovereign co-creators or sovereign individual creators, but using co-creation on the way. So we'll jump out of there and we'll go back a little bit into needs versus wants. This is really important, because when we look at what are our needs, what are our wants, and this is a very important conversation when you're talking about community. So you get a community together and you have a bunch of people, they're all going to be talking about their needs. And they need this, they need that. And if they're coming from Babylon, they're going to be bringing in a lot of things that they think are needs, but are actually wants that are actually destructive and not sustainable and not regenerative. When we go back into what we are, which we'll talk about later, that's not as important. The only thing that's important in this process is awareness. Because if you're not aware on what you're doing and how you're doing it, you have very little ability to change that action or that outcome. So what do we need? We need to breathe, right? We need to drink water, right? We need to eat somewhat, but we need to eat, and we need some kind of shelter in some environments, in some conditions. We'll call that the container. And maybe in that container too, we'll also say there's another aspect that's yet to be determined, and that's love. Food, water, shelter, and love. And in our lives of what we are, we're still figuring out what of this impact love has on us and what it does to our beings and why it's so important. And that essentially is actually the goal and the purpose of the nomadic community space, and that's the discovery of what love is in its true essence. And through that discovery, that mastery of love, we're enabling ourselves to interact with a world of darkness. Thanks. I'm going to see you here on this next video. I'm going to wrap it up here. Have a wonderful